Hi, this is Bill Hitchcock, and I'm just going to work through some exercises from Chapter 2. What I've got here on my spreadsheet is the original documentation sheet from Chapter 2, but then I went in and deleted out all the other sheets except for this class ring from Inland Jewelers. That's the one that I want to work on and just kind of run through a few ideas. So first we're going to start out on the documentation sheet. And since this is the capstone exercise, it's actually found on page 197, so that's my starting page, and it's also just the ending page as well. So therefore, there's my pages in the chapter, it's just one. I'm going to type in my name here. I'll type in the date that I complete this on, so it's 5/22/2018. Hit enter. I've got today's date in, so it's just giving me that. And I haven't completed this at all, so I'm going to make this days since completion. I've got that saved. Then other things that I want to do is I want to update my worksheets, so I'm going to call this E02 C1 class ring, and we'll delete out the other worksheet because I don't have another one. And we'll just have to remember to update the number of minutes that it takes me to finish up this assignment. Alright, well, let's jump over now to the class ring. And part of what I want you to learn by taking these classes and working through some of these lessons is how to design our spreadsheets to make them a little bit more usable. And you can see on this one, they've got some assumptions. We've got a jewelry site, we've got the date, we have all the records for our customers and what the cost of the ring is going to be, whether or not it's personalized, the total cost, the number of years that they're going to take to pay it off, and then finally our monthly payment. So, that's all good and well, but down at the bottom here, we've got the assumptions that go into this, and I might want to put those up at the top of the spreadsheet so that way it's kind of front and center, you know exactly what we have there. So I'm going to move a few things around that way. So let's see, I've got the ring type, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, if you will. And up at the top here, I've got, well, there's a little bit of space here. There's 1, so I'm going to insert some more. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll insert 5 here. And now I've got my date that extended that whole series of colors. So I'm just going to highlight that, clear all of that out. I don't need that. Grab my ring type and cost, cut that by hitting Control X, and I want to put that up here at the top. Then down below, I also have the personalizing surcharge and interest rate. I want to cut that and move that up to the top as well. And we can always, readjust this, widen out some of the columns and clean that up. I guess I've got one row too many, so I'm just going to select that row by clicking on it, right click, and hit delete. And we've got that put in. And then now we've got my customers down here, so I want to actually insert another row, or I should say another column, because I like to keep track of the customer's name or number. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Format that with a comma format. Copy this down. And so far, getting close, except I've got number 8 here showing up as my totals. Well, I don't really want that, so I'm going to delete that out of there. And I don't want the totals right underneath there, because if I do, let me save this, and I would sort my records. So say that I want to sort by, the customer name, for example. And if I sort this A to Z, That seemed to work all right. But then if I sort this Z to A, I've got totals suddenly are crammed up at the top, and that's all a jumbled mess. So I need to undo that. In fact, I'm going to undo it to the original back in the customer number order. I need to insert a new row here. And that's looking a little bit better. So that way, again, now if I sort this by the customer's name, by choosing that, it's just sorting that data. So that's ultimately what I want. So that's why we always include a blank row above our field names, and we've got a blank row right after the last record. All right, a couple other things. There's some visualization experts that say, you know, you never want to have anything that kind of clutters the data. And one thing that tends to clutter data is having borders. And you know, there's arguments about keeping these or not keeping them, but I would say if you really want it, wait until you're done setting up the spreadsheet the way you want it. So I'm going to highlight all those cells that have borders on them and just clear that away. And I want to adjust some of the other kind of naming of this. So for example, my field names, I'm going to align that so they all are at the bottom of the sheet. I want to take this formatting style and put that onto my date so that way that matches up. This one I'm actually going to get rid of. I'm going to clear that away. And for the personalizing surcharge, we need to widen out that column a little bit. Let's use the same format style on these cells. And we'll do it on these as well. So that way it tightens everything up just a little bit. Alright, if I hit Control Home, I'm back to cell A1. So now I want to take my Inland Jewelers, I want to move that over to cell A1. It says it's going to unmerge the cells, that's fine. But now what I'll do is I'll merge this all the way across the entire set of my data. Alright, finally, I'm going to assume that I'm going to have hundreds of customers. So what I want to do is come down to cell A9, click on View, Freeze Panes, and Freeze Panes. That way, if I had more customers, I can still read everything up at the top, and that cleans that up a little bit better. Alright, well, let's put in the date. So here we can have equals today, and we've got today's date showing up. We can decide how we want that to be formatted. Month, day, year is pretty standard in the US. However, European countries, they typically do day, month, year. So let's do this as a long date, but that's too wide. So I can either widen out this column, but now suddenly my customer names are a little bit kind of spaced out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this long date format, choose Format Cells, give it a custom format, and rather than using the long date format, I'm just going to use the 3 characters of the day of the week, 3 characters for my month, and that narrows that up just a bit. And it's not too bad. You might want to widen that out a little bit more just in case we get a wider date, you know, say on a Wednesday or something like that. Alright, well, let's come down and see if we can do some of the calculations. So we've got our first customer ordered a gold ring, so we want to find out what the cost of the ring is. Well, if we look up at our table, we can see gold rings cost $550. Titanium rings cost $700, silver $400, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I want to use something that's called a VLOOKUP function. other words, a vertical lookup function. It takes the word gold, looks through our table and sees if it finds a match, and if it does, it returns the cost of the item. So we'll type in equals VLOOKUP. The first parameter is the lookup value. So that's gold in this case. I'll type in a comma. The table array are these cells up here. Now the key thing is when I copy this down, C9 is going to become C10, which is titanium, that's fine. But E3 and F6 are going to change because they'll drop down as well and give me E4 through F7. So just keep that in mind, we'll fix that in a bit. Next, we type in a comma. It asks for the column index number. The column index number is which column of your table. So it's either the ring type, column 1, or the cost. So it's the cost that I want, so I'll type in a number 2. Type in a comma. The last parameter is either true or false. In other words, did this item match exactly one of these ring types, or are we doing an approximate match? In this case, we want to do an exact match because we want to match up the word gold, the word titanium, the word platinum exactly with what we have here. So I want to choose false, and I'll type in a parenthesis, hit enter, and sure enough, I've got my $550. So I'm going to format that with a $sign. I'll try copying this down, and I find out titanium worked, but silver, my other gold, my platinum, and platinum down here did not work. And the reason that they're not, again, is up here I've got E3 through F6, but when I copied it down, it's given me E4, which is this cell, through F7, which it can still find titanium in there, so it worked in this case. But what I really want to do is I always want to lock in row 3 and F6 so it doesn't change that. So now when I copy that formula down, every time it always gives me row 3 and row 6. So there's the cost of my rings. Now down at the bottom we want the total, so we'll type in equals sum. We're going to sum up everything from that blank row to the word cost. So that way if I insert a new row here, or if I insert a new row above here, that sum will also include it. So we'll format that one. And things are looking pretty good that way. Alright, the next column has whether or not the ring is personalized or not. And we've got yes, no's in here. Now for these, you can kind of, it's a little bit crowded how close it is to cost. So one argument would be to just take this and center it. But the problem with centering it is yes and no kind of varies a little bit. You know, no is only 2 characters, yes is 3. So what you might consider doing is doing just one character. Do Y's and N's, for instance, and that way you can center it. Another option would be, rather than centering this, is you might just indent that so that way everything lines up on the leftmost. You know, it's kind of one of those things. It's a little bit personal preference on here. I'd almost be tempted, rather than doing the word yes, the word no, let's just do N's and Y's. That way the user only has to type in one character, and we can do something like that. So let's put in N, Y, 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 and N. Then next we've got the total and the years and the monthly payment. For the total, we're assuming that there's going to be a surcharge on this. So I'd be somewhat tempted. I like to see things being done explicitly. So show them what the actual cost is for the personalization. So let's change this to be our ring cost so we know what that number is really referring to. And we'll do the same thing up here. And then I'm going to take these cells and let's shift them over. And we're going to copy in this over here. And we'll get the personalization cost. We can widen that out so we can actually read the word personalization. Take it a bit wider and then just narrow it back up. So my personalization cost, I can do this a couple ways. One is we can say we'll do an if statement. If the ring is personalized. In other words, if that equals yes. If that's true, my cost is going to be the ring cost times the surcharge, the 5%. And then I always need to use the cell so I can hit function F4. Hit that a couple of times and we'll have that. If it's not personalized, it's just going to be a 0. So we hit enter, and in this case I've got 0. Copy it down, and there I've got my personalization costs spelled out exactly how we have it there. So therefore the total cost of the ring is going to equal the ring cost plus the personalization cost and we can copy this over, widen that column out so we can actually read it, and 4,400 plus 120 does indeed equal 4,520, so that looks good. So far this is coming together fairly well. One other approach that we could take is rather than using a cell reference with this $2, what I can do is I can give a range name to this cell, this personalization surcharge. So I'm going to highlight that cell. I'm going to go up to Formulas, Create from Selection, and assign the label in the left column to this cell in the right column. So I'll hit OK. So now when I click on this 5%, if I look up in the name box, I see that I've got this name that's called personalizing. The personalizing surcharge is really what it is. So I'm going to change my cost down here and try this formula again. Equals if it's a personalized ring. So if that equals yes, then I want to take the ring cost times cell I2, and this time it gives me the range name. So then I don't have to worry about whether or not this is an absolute mixed or relative cell address. Otherwise, I'm going to put in 0, hit enter, copy this formula down. It works the same way, and that way I've got a little bit more documentation in my formula because you can see the range name appearing up here. Alright, next we've got the number of years that we're going to pay for this loan, and we want to figure out the monthly payment on it. So we'll do the same kind of thing with the interest rate. I want to give this a range name. So create from selection, left column. I've given that to the range name on interest rate. So for my monthly payment, we're going to have equals the PMT function, which will give me an amortized payment, or in other words, an equal payment for all the payments that we'd make for this particular loan. So I'm going to be paying this off for 2 years. So my rate is going to be the interest rate, the 3%. However, it's a monthly payment, so I've got to divide that by 12. The number of periods is equal to the years times 12, comma. The PV, or the present value of the loan, that's the amount that I'm going to borrow, so I'm going to finance the total cost of this. So I have to enter that as a negative amount because I'm borrowing the money. So I type in minus the total cost. The next thing is the future value. That's in brackets, so it's optional. So if I wouldn't have put this in, it would have been just fine. But my future value is just 0. We're going to take this all the way down until we're done paying off the loan. And then finally, the type is whether or not we pay at the beginning or the end of the period. Normally you pay at the end of the period, the end of the month. So I'll type in a 0 there, parenthesis, and enter. And I find out I have to make a monthly payment of about $24 per month. All right, couple of things. One is, if I format this using a general format, you'll see that it's actually $23 and some fractional cents. So nobody's going to write out a check or put that onto a credit card for fractional cents. So what I want to do with this one is I'm going to use the round function, and I want to round this off to the nearest penny. So I type in 2 there. So that way I get the 23.64, and we'll do the general format there, and you can see I've now rounded off my fractional cents. So let's give this a currency format, copy this down. So I've got all my monthly payments. We can sum that up. Now I'd like to know if these are my monthly payments. I want to do a couple of things here. First, I'm going to take the years. I'm going to format those with a comma format, just to shove that over a little bit. I'd like to get the number of payments, so I'm going to copy that over here. So my number of payments is going to be the years times 12. I'll have my total interest, or total paid, so the total amount that I'm paying is going to be my monthly payment times the number of payments. And I can copy that down and paste it. And finally, we could get the total interest. So the total interest is going to equal the total amount that I pay minus the original ring cost. And we can see how much that ends up being for all of our rings. So you can, kind of make a decision. It's like, well, from the standpoint of the jewelry company, a 3% loan, it gives them a little bit of extra money. But again, they're helping the customer, I guess, as far as letting them pay this off on a monthly basis, so that way they don't have to come up with the original $550 at the very beginning. Instead, if you want to sell this to your customer and say, look, for only $25 a month, that's less than $1 a day, you could have this wonderful class ring and get everyone excited about that. All right, let's clean this up just a little bit more. We want to see how this is going to look from a formatting standpoint when we print this all out. Looks like I've got my jewelry sheet a little bit wider, so let's remerge and center that all the way across. I'm trying to decide if I want to shift around my ring costs and move some of that data from one place to another just to kind of line things up a little bit. It might make some sense to take these ring costs and actually put that right above where we have this. So that way it's a little bit cleaner that way. Same thing with the personalizing surcharge. I might put that right above the personalization costs so we can see that. You can decide if you want to move the interest rates off to the side. Let's not center those numbers. Let's put them down even with the lines there. Let me try this again. There we go. I've got that down, and things are looking fairly good. So let's save this. Let's group all of our sheets. Check the page layout. Choose print titles. Page. We can decide if we want landscape or portrait. I think this one's fairly wide, so I might do landscape. I want to narrow up my margins. I want to add the headers and footers. I want to put in the course name. I want to put in the date printed. I want to add my custom footer and have the file, which here's the file name. I've got the page, so I want the page number of the total number of pages. And finally, I'm going to have the sheet, and I want to insert the sheet tab name. Hit OK. Try print preview. See how this is starting to look. There's my documentation sheet. That looks fine. Here's my Inland Jewelers. It looks like I've actually got everything fitting on here fairly well. So that looks good. I'm going to ungroup my sheets. And things are looking good. So let's save this one last time, and we'll wrap up that lesson.